It's November 1961. An architect, John Graham, contractor Howard Wright, and a restaurateur gather around a giant steel ring in a parking lot just north of Seattle. It's elevated just a few feet off the ground, and it's about 95 feet or 29 meters in diameter and 14 feet wide. It's mostly just a frame right now, but one segment holds a full dining room setup, complete with chairs, tablecloth, and plates, everything that's needed for an upscale dinner. This is the parking lot for the Western Gear Corporation, where they make, gears. In just a couple of weeks, this entire rig is going to get disassembled and hoisted in the air 500 feet or 152 meters to become part of Seattle's Space Needle. What they're on is called a carousel. It sits on dozens of small little wheels that distribute the enormous weight of the steel across the railroad-like tracks. These are bent into two concentric circles. This is just a mock-up to make sure that the idea and the mechanism it runs on actually works. When fully loaded, this carousel will weigh 125 tons, or about the weight of two brick and concrete houses, or about the same as a diesel-electric locomotive. And those are apt comparisons, because this technology comes from trains, and these folks want to turn them into a building. Shockingly though, the motor that propels all of this motion is only putting out about a single horsepower. That's where the special gear made by Western Gear comes into play. The carousel moves slow enough with so little friction in the entire system that this little drive can chug along at about an inch or 2.5 centimeters per second. And it turns out that this is the perfect speed. If it went any faster, our diners will start to get queasy as their inner ears begin registering motion differently from their brains. But this is also the perfect speed because it's calibrated so that the circle will complete a full 360-degree rotation in a single hour. That's also about the same speed that it takes our diners to sit down, have a drink, and just finish their meal. Although that might just be the case no matter what, because studies show that people will eat and drink at the exact rate of a full turn. If it goes twice as fast, they'll just drink twice as fast. Another study shows that spinning like this will increase restaurant sales up to 50% more than their static cousins. But during this test, no one knew any of that yet. But this is just the first test of many to come. In its permanent home, it will be critical that all the gears and wheels and the rails line up exactly perfectly. Not only is this anchored to some of the most active fault lines in the world, any problem with this contraption would almost certainly lead to national embarrassment. This rotating restaurant, the eye of the needle, will have the eyes of the world looking on it. But when the project's architect, John Graham, was first approached with the idea, he had never attempted such a strange thing before. He was clever though, so right after hearing about it, he was able to convince his hotel client in Hawaii to slap this flying saucer-looking thing on top to become the first rotating restaurant in the United States. Laurent was quite a bit lower and smaller though. But back in Seattle, the goal of the clients were not as modest. They wanted to create an Eiffel Tower for the United States. Like the Eiffel Tower, this is the centerpiece of a World's Fair. Eiffel's was in 1889 and celebrating Paris's industrial and artistic strengths. This one, which was a little over 70 years later in 1962, is themed Man's Life in the Space Age. The futuristic-looking tower and its accompanying displays will hopefully be convincing enough to settle the fears and assure the world that the United States is winning the Cold War with its advanced technology. So that's why Graham designed the experience of going to this restaurant to be a miniature journey into space. It begins on the ground as a sky pilotess welcomes you into the metal elevator cab, also known as space lifts. It's lined on three sides with windows to be able to offer a continuous, unobstructed view outward as you ascend for 41 seconds. Once at your destination, you step into the waiting area, and it fits inside of the 63-foot or 21-meter circle that's made by that carousel. This area stands still, and it also includes the host stand, the coat check, and the kitchen and things like that. A triangular stair in the middle takes you to the other levels, like the observation deck or the restrooms. Once it's time for you to be seated, you step onto the carousel, and it's turning in the exact same way it was in the parking lot. The host finds your table with the help of some floor markers to orient the position of the table numbers, and as you're seated, they hand you an unusual circular menu. The backside has a map. You and the Space Needle, they're at the center of this map, while the outer ring mimics the frame of the wraparound windows of the entire building. Each one is labeled with a snapshot of a vignette that you would see during dinner on a clear evening. Elliott Bay, Mount Adams, or Mount Rainier. And while it seems like this is a celebration of that landscape around you, the menu kind of makes it look like you're at the center of the world. Or if we extend that space metaphor, maybe you're the star at the center of a universe. That's the fundamental paradox of revolving restaurants like this. While they're all about looking out, you are fully separated from the thing that you're ogling. You're no longer in the city that you came from, or even on Earth. You're high above it, and technology helped to get you there. And in some ways, I guess that this recalls the frictionless, weightless environments of spaceflight. I mean, spinning and space tend to go hand in hand. Planets spin, and space stations do too when they're attempting to mimic the effects of gravity by rotating. But it also fundamentally destabilizes your relationship to one's surroundings. Continuously spinning, it's disorienting. It never allows the viewer or the diner to really establish their bearings in space. The technology of spinning restaurants is basically borrowed old technology that was developed for much more terrestrial origin: trains. While the chief engineer of the project, John Manassian, did work for NASA, he designed the gantries, basically big, slow train cars for moving rockets while they were earthbound. Even today, the most prolific engineer of rotating restaurants is a company called Macton. They began operation in the 1940s, and they made turntables for flipping train cars around without lifting them off of the tracks. I guess you could argue that the futuristic aspect about adopting this technology is by using it for buildings. But even rotating buildings and rooms aren't that new either. They harken back all the way to ancient Rome, where Nero's Golden House featured a revolving dining room. There were also revolving stages in kabuki theater since the 1600s, even an entire rotating house in the 1930s in Italy. Finally, there was even a whole series of rotating jails that were scattered across the Midwest. The continuous motion prevented the inmates from sawing through the bars as they continuously passed by. But one ended up breaking down in Iowa, and the inmates, they couldn't be reached for days. But incarcerated inmates are not the association that these restaurants, their owners, or their designers want you to pair with this novelty. This was the 1960s, and it was all about space.
Another successful shot, an achievement of major strategic importance for America's defense.
The same year that the Eye of the Needle opened, Kennedy gave his famous speech about stepping foot on the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard.
But because they are hard.
And it's also the same year that Hanna-Barbera debuted the Jetsons, where the visual similarities between it and the Space Needle are pretty clear. The experience of Revolution was so successfully rebranded by all this that it led to an explosion of revolving restaurants across the United States. Within a decade, there were at least 100 spinning ones across the country. They became a sort of status symbol that meant that a city was tech-minded and economically successful. The space travel theme became this effective, immersive story for powering these dining experiences. In some ways, I think that makes us a little bit like roadside attractions or Googie architecture. In the same way that those might lure you down a road that you wouldn't just otherwise go down, I think the space story and its movement are pulling customers that are eager to get away for a bit by heading down the road less traveled. Rotating restaurants then are operating at a bit of a deficit by not being located at the street level. No one can just wander in. They have to seek out that experience and plan ahead by creating a reservation. Instead of overcoming vast horizontal distances of road-tripping families, these overcome the vertical ones. Through the power of suggestion here, the technology of trains and jails was transformed into a popular urban space-themed attraction. The story, though, isn't just as innocuous as a superficial applique might be. It's actually hiding a much more destructive agenda. And I'm not just talking about extracting extra profit. I mean, these things make for seriously compromised spatial, social, and cultural experiences. To see why, let's just head over to Atlanta to look at the Sundial Grill and View. It began spinning in 1976, and it sits atop a hotel that was designed by the architect and developer John Portman. It was, for a very long time, the tallest hotel in the world. As you approach the building, it looks just like a gleaming glass cylindrical tower. But when you actually arrive, you're greeted with several stories of rough, concrete walls, an absolutely impenetrable fortress. If you're in a car, great. You just pull into one of its open mouths. If you're on foot, though, good luck getting around this thing, let alone finding an entrance into it. If you are lucky enough to get inside, though, it's pretty clear that you're not meant to leave anyway, as a series of tunnels ensure that you can connect easily with nearby buildings without ever going outside. Of course, all of that is by design, to keep visitors in and locals out. Buildings like this turn their back to the city on the ground, only to face it again in every direction above. While the skyline belongs to the diners, the actual city on the ground is a thing to be escaped. Even the Jetsons, which imagined a life high above the clouds, lived completely divorced from the Earth. We never actually see it, but we presume it's down there somewhere. In the Jetsons, we don't know what ruined that Earth, whether it was people or technology, or what makes life in the sky so desirable.
Elroy, how many times have I told you not to wear your space boots in the house?
I was just taking a shortcut.
I can't help but see the parallel of the recent Blue Origin spaceflight, as Katy Perry's attempt to connect with others over the experience has only led to having the opposite effect. said it was alienating and tone deaf.
You guys, I have to tell you, look at the moon.
The tragedy, or the irony, or whatever you want to call it, is that this thing claims to be all about experiencing Atlanta, but actually doing the exact opposite, by substituting an authentic or literally grounded experience for the fleeting novelty of a technological escape from it. The building is merely a machine for creating novel experiences, like an amusement ride would be. It's not something that participates in the construction of place. Everything about it undermines the opportunity for having an authentic experience of the city. Even the interior of the restaurant becomes something that you look through to look outside. It's not something you're meant to notice or experience directly. Where you are in a city is only something to get away from. And that's why the novelty, I think, wears off pretty quickly. After 54,000 rotations, the sundial, it stopped spinning in 2017. When it stopped, there were fewer than 15 operating rotating restaurants in the US. By that time, the country had just moved on. Gen Xers, I don't think, are quite as fascinated by space as the boomers were. They started growing disdain for kitschy, superficial spectacles like revolving restaurants. Interestingly, though, they are making a comeback right now in these post-pandemic years. Old ones are getting turned back on for the first time in decades, and New York has a new one. The Space Needle, it was just renovated too. Instead of metaphorically carrying people into space, though, they're just trying to get people out of their houses. In situations like this, when something comes back around for another go, one of the best things I think we can do is assume that we don't know what it could be yet. To see it with fresh eyes for what it can be, not necessarily get stuck in the nostalgia of what it's been. But not every scenario can be accounted for, like this scene from Final Destination where a penny flick actually takes down the Space Needle and leads to its ultimate demise. Not to add fuel to the fire of fear, but my next video is about how buildings are protected from being destroyed by explosives. And that video is actually viewable right now, 3 weeks before it comes to YouTube. It's available on Nebula, actually my home base for my content. In fact, if you only catch me here on YouTube, you're missing out on a ton of stuff, like building tours and a behind-the-scenes tour of my new studio that are only available on Nebula. But it's not just my videos. Nebula is powered by over 200 creators, including Hoog and City Nerd and Real Engineering, making it one of the most innovative streaming platforms out there. By pooling our resources together, we can push each other to create even better and more ambitious projects. Some of the best content on Nebula is actually from our original productions, where bigger budgets allow us to experiment with brand new ideas. For example, check out Neo's Underexposure, some of the most compelling documentary storytelling I think there is out there right now. And Nebula offers flexible subscription plans for you, monthly, annual, and yes, even a lifetime option. And that means that you only pay once and have access to everything that Nebula ever creates forever. So start by catching my next video about bomb-proof buildings by clicking on the link in the screen or in the description, or scan the QR code. You'll save 40% off of your Nebula subscription with my link, and you'll never miss a video again, and it only costs $3 a month when you sign up for a year. Plus, you'll be right at the heart of the media movement that's changing how creators and audiences connect. So check it out, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and see you over on Nebula.